Quiet on the set, please.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
And action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Hey everybody, welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign, and we have a very special episode for you today because today we are honoring the 100th birthday of one of the, I would say, biggest icons of American cinema of all time. And of course, we're talking about Marilyn Monroe. I think a lot of people think of her as like the breathy, sexy blonde, but we're going to get into some movies that really show some different sides of her. Really dip into her dramas and some of the really wonderful work she did as an actress. And she was a very wonderful dramatic actress, by the way.
She really was. And many of the films, if not all of them, that we're going to talk about today are available right now because everybody is celebrating her birthday, which is really kind of nice.
I know. This month, June, everything is all Marilyn all the time.
The woman who probably has the most iconic rendition of singing Happy Birthday is getting her happy birthday due, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So happy birthday to Marilyn Monroe. And we're going to kick in with one of her earlier movies that Nan has just discovered.
Yes, I had never seen the movie Ladies of the Chorus, which is from 1948, directed by Phil Carlson, written by Henry Sauber and Joseph Carroll. It centers on a former burlesque star, May, played by Adele Jurgens, and her daughter, Peggy, played by Marilyn Monroe, who both dance in the chorus. Now, when the featured burlesque dancer quits the show, and there's a very funny scene where she basically gets beat up by Marilyn Monroe, daughter Peggy takes her place. Well, Peggy falls in love with Randy Carroll, a man from the wealthy upper class, played by Rand Brooks. But the relationship really worries Peggy's mother, May, who is concerned that the differences in their social status make life together impossible. Just like what happened to her when she was young.
Uh-oh.
Yes. Will Peggy and Randy overcome the differences in their background? I'm not going to tell you the end. This was a low-budget musical produced by Columbia Pictures. It was Marilyn's only film for Columbia, her first starring role, also her first time singing on screen. The film was shot in just 10 days, and it was shot before Marilyn had rhinoplasty. Her nose, by the way, is absolutely beautiful just the way it was.
So there was no need to change it.
I didn't think there was, but that's, what can I say? I'm not a big fan of plastic surgery. Although Monroe and Jurgens play mother and daughter, Adele Jurgens was only 9 years older than her.
I was going to say, I know that Adele Jurgens is not that much older than Marilyn.
Well, they kind of add some gray to her hair, which is supposed to,
That old trick. The spray the temples.
They really look more like sisters. I mean, Marilyn was 22 at the time. So, fun fact, Rand Brooks, who plays Monroe's love interest, may look familiar to y'all. He portrayed Charles Hamilton, Scarlett's first husband, in Gone with the Wind. And Eddie Garr, I did not realize, Eddie Garr, who plays Billy McKay, the love interest of Adele Jurgens, he is actually Terry Garr's father.
Yes.
And he's quite good in the film as well. Well, according to Monroe biographer Donald Spoto, Monroe and Jurgens actually became fast friends. Jurgens is quoted as saying, "Monroe told me very tearfully she had lost her mother, and that just like the chorus girls of the story, she knew what social ostracism was like. Marilyn was the sort of girl you instinctively wanted to protect, even though she obviously had brains and probably didn't need much protection." Well, Jurgens also said that Monroe was eager to do good work on the film. She arrived early to set every day. She knew her lines perfectly, something that she will struggle with as she becomes more and more famous. Monroe worked on the role with Columbia acting coach Natasha Lattès, some people say Lightus, who would become very influential in Monroe's career later. And reportedly, Monroe actually fell in love with Fred Karger, who was the studio's arranger and vocal coach. And although the romance didn't work out, Monroe remained friendly with his family. Her star power is so on display in this film. It's also a very different type of performance. Yes, she's playing a burlesque dancer, but she doesn't have the physical and vocal mannerisms that she would come to have later and become known for. And when you say burlesque, this is not burlesque
It's
like
mild
Gypsy Rose.
version.
No,
Yes.
no, no, no. This is like, a club. Somebody's dancing and
Yeah.
singing. I mean,
Here's a shoulder.
yeah, exactly. If even that.
Yeah.
Her singing voice is just wonderful in this, as is her dancing. The first scene when she goes on for the burlesque dancer that's quit, she is elegant and confident. And in the number, every baby needs a dad, daddy. Oh boy, there's a real Rita Hayworth quality to what she does with that number, although there's a very cringy portion where everybody comes out with a baby doll and they all start dancing with the baby doll and moving their legs and arms. It's a little creepy. But
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it's kind of hysterical, actually. Well, to me, this role clearly shows her star potential, but Columbia did not see it that way. Shortly after this film, Monroe was released from her contract. And I was thinking about it. It's sort of like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. Big mistake.
Big mistake.
Huge.
Yes.
Because just 2 years later, she would appear in Asphalt Jungle and she would be well on her way. Columbia actually tried to make up for their mistake when they re-released the picture in November of 1952. Poor Adele Jurgens gets bumped out of the star
course.
spot. Marilyn Monroe is put as top billing in the opening credits, which is how you see the film now. Jurgens is sensational.
I loved her.
She is just wonderful. There's actually some really funny moments in this film as well. There's a great scene with the clerk in the florist shop where Randy has been purchasing orchids for Peggy. There's this bizarre portrayal of the designers of this engagement party that they're going to have. And they come in trilling their voices like they're very hoity-toity. I can't even explain it. You just have to watch it. It's hysterical. And the ending of the film is really quite moving. I really enjoyed it. It's just an hour long. You can find it on TCM and on YouTube. Really worth seeing Marilyn in this one.
I love that. Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and I'm going to take us to 1952, a few years later,
4 years,
you know, and I'm going to talk about one of my favorite performances, hands down, by Marilyn Monroe. And it's, of course, in the movie Don't Bother to Knock.
Well, of course you would pick a dark film.
Dark. Of course I would. Now, this was directed by Roy Baker and it was written by Daniel Teradash. Now, Teradash, the next year, would end up winning the Oscar for writing From Here to Eternity.
Yes.
So great screenwriter. It was based on a 1951 novel called Mischief by Charlotte Armstrong. So Don't Bother to Knock, to me, it's one of the most unusual performances of Marilyn Monroe's career.
Yes.
It's definitely one of the darkest, which, you know, I like some dark. And it's also one of the most compelling. It really starts with this elevator operator in a very swanky New York hotel room. Of course, he's played by Elisha Cook Jr. We love him here. And what he does is he ends up getting his emotionally disturbed niece a job babysitting this young girl played by Donna Corcoran, while her parents, played by Jim Backus and Lorene Tuttle, go out for the evening at the hotel. Now, while she's caring for this child, her mental state really begins to spiral out of control a little bit, which leads to some very unsettling behavior on her part that really starts to alarm those around her. Now, meanwhile, she forms this bizarre connection with this other guest who's moved into the room across the courtyard where they can see each other through their windows, and that becomes a whole other thing. This guest is a lonely airline pilot played by Richard Widmark, and he's actually at the hotel because his girlfriend is the lounge singer at the club below, and he's there to try to make amends with her. And she is played by the wonderful Anne Bancroft, and this is her film debut.
Yeah, and she's beautiful.
She's beautiful and so good.
Didn't she kind of remind you of Ruth Roman?
She did. She
Yeah,
does. They have a very, especially when she was young.
When she was younger.
She has a very Ruth Roman essence to her. Well, so as this evening unfolds, and you know, Marilyn's looking after this child, her very fragile mental state begins to really crack, and it becomes really dangerous, and it reveals all these deep emotional problems she's carried with her for years, and it really is just haunting about, you know, what she's gone through, what she's carrying around with her. But this movie, I think, is most notable because it really, really shows Marilyn Monroe in a wonderful dramatic role.
Yes.
Now, the film is also significant because I think this film single-handedly changed the minds of people's perception about Marilyn Monroe as an actress, because a lot of people at 20th Century Fox, and this was a Fox film, they still saw her as the dumb blonde, the sex pot. They didn't really think she had much, dramatic capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And were they wrong? This performance really shows that. And actually, this film was a test because Marilyn had been really begging for meatier roles and more dramatic roles to the head of 20th Century Fox, Darrell F. Zanuck, but he wasn't quite convinced that she could pull off drama. So, as a test, he gave her the lead in this role, specifically because the movie wasn't that expensive to make. And so, if the experiment didn't work, he wasn't out a lot of money. Nice of him.
Mm.
But what she did with it, the nuances that she plays in this emotionally fragile person is just unbelievable. And she really shows emotions and ranges and depth that I don't think a lot of people knew she was capable
Yeah.
of. So this was a real moment where she proves herself as a dramatic actress. And I think it's when people really started taking her seriously as a dramatic actress. And had this movie not come along, I'm not sure she would have gotten to play in movies like River of No Return or later The Misfits. But she needed this one as a win to make sure that, she was proven as a wonderful dramatic actress. And this movie absolutely did it. If you haven't seen this one, absolutely go see it.
Yeah, she really takes you on a journey. You
Yeah.
don't know that there's anything really wrong with her at the beginning, but she just slowly, as you so beautifully described,
Yeah.
kind of starts to crack.
Well, a couple things behind the scenes which are really interesting was, we were talking about her acting coach. Well,
Yeah.
her acting coach was very much present on this set,
Mm.
much to the director's dismay, because what would happen was the director, Roy Baker, he would call cut after a scene, and Marilyn would immediately run over to her coach and get guidance and direction from her, as opposed to the director, whose job it was to give her guidance and direction. Well, Baker did not like this at all, and he eventually had the acting coach banned from the set because she was being too disruptive.
There's a similar story on one of the ones I'm going to talk about. Yeah.
From what I've read about their relationship, it was complicated,
Yes.
and I think this woman became very obsessed with Marilyn Monroe.
I think you're right.
It was a very unhealthy relationship, and it didn't do Marilyn Monroe any favors.
No.
On sets with directors and other actors. Also, Baker, in his memoirs years later, he talked about in editing and in post-production, he really had to piecemeal together her performance from various takes because she was still a really insecure actress at that point.
Mm.
But he did. He cobbled together a beautiful performance from her, and it shows her beautifully. And then there's another, I think, very touching story that Anne Bancroft would tell years later. She talked about this one particular scene where Marilyn's character has to come down an elevator and enter the lobby, and she's supposed to be just emotionally wrecked to the point of collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that when Marilyn emerged from that elevator, that she was so vulnerable and she was so raw and she was so emotionally disturbed that it really stunned the cast and the crew. And Bancroft said it was really hard for her to watch because it wasn't like watching an actor perform. It was about watching a real person go through something absolutely harrowing.
Wow.
And that just goes to show what a great dramatic actress Marilyn Monroe was.
That's really something.
Great
Wow.
movie.
Well, the next one we want to talk about is something you mentioned, River of No Return,
Yes.
1954, directed by Otto Preminger, written by Frank Fenton, who was an uncredited writer on Out of the Past with Robert Mitchum.
Nice.
From a story by Louis Lance. This film is set in 1875. Widower Matt Calder, played by Robert Mitchum, who was recently released from prison for killing a man while defending someone else. He arrives in a tent city that's formed by the gold rush in search of his 10-year-old son, played by Tommy Reddick. Now, when he locates him, he learns that the young boy has found shelter with a dance hall singer named Kay, who's played by Marilyn Monroe. Matt and his son leave the tent city and head for their farm on homesteaded land, but they will meet up with Kay again when her gambler fiancé, Harry Weston, played by Rory Calhoun, insists that he and his fiancée travel down the river to Council City to lay claim to a gold mine. Well, they're not exactly the river rafting type.
No, not at all.
She does have a pair of jeans on.
And she looks really good in those jeans.
Really good in those jeans. But the rapids threaten to kill the couple. And that's when they happen upon Matt Calder's homestead. Well, Matt saves their lives, only to have Weston steal his horse, and his gun to go get the gold claim, forcing Matt, his son, and Kay, who decides to stay and help them, to eventually flee the homestead because the Native Americans attack because, well, Matt has stolen their land. So there is that. Yeah, there is that little problematic thing. The film then follows the threesome down this treacherous journey through the rapids, which is why it's called River of No Return, to get to Council City. What will happen when they confront Harry? Will Matt's son ever be able to understand his father's past? Will Matt and young Mark create a new family with saloon girl Kay? Perhaps.
Who wouldn't want a saloon girl stepmama?
Right? Exactly. Well, Monroe was a star at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
Having filmed Niagara in 1953 and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes in the same year. You mentioned butting heads with the director on Don't Bother to Knock. Well, Monroe and Otto Preminger also butted heads, although he was kind of notoriously, I think, difficult.
Yeah, he was difficult, absolutely.
But he also did not appreciate the acting coach of Natasha, who kept interfering with production. Preminger complained that she told Monroe to enunciate every syllable of every word, which to Preminger's mind was completely unnatural. Not only that, it made her lips and face move so much it was hard to photograph her. Apparently, Robert Mitchum saved the day. According to Preminger's autobiography, he said, during rehearsals, Mitchum would ignore Marilyn's affectations, the way she was speaking. And then when Preminger was ready to shoot, Mitchum would slap her sharply on the backside, say, now stop that nonsense. Let's play it like human beings.
Clearly,
Come on.
clearly before Me Too.
Yeah, clearly before Me Too. I'm not advocating that, but she did drop the mannerisms that her acting coach was
Hey, it worked.
insisting, yes, at least for a time. Well, both Preminger and Monroe were doing the film kind of against their will due to contractual obligations. Preminger's experience on this film was so bad that it convinced him he never wanted to work for a studio again, and he bought out his contract for $150,000, so he never had to do it. The film was made in CinemaScope, with the majority of it shot in Alberta, Canada, and river scenes on the Salmon River in Idaho. The production did take a physical toll on Monroe, who severely injured her ankle, and there are some reports that she almost drowned. Some people say that due to shooting in CinemaScope, they couldn't use stunt doubles because the camera was, you could see.
Yeah.
And so many of the stunts had to be done by the actors. There's some people that dispute that, but when you watch it, you can really see that it looks like it's them. Monroe actually called this her worst film.
Really?
So surprising. Yeah.
That's so surprising to me.
And while Preminger may not be the best person for a Western, she does give a wonderful performance.
She does.
She found yet another variation on a somewhat vulnerable woman, but I mean, somebody who can not only handle the rapids, but she comes toe to toe with Robert Mitchum. She completely holds her own. She also has such a lovely, warm, maternal part in this.
Yeah, the scenes with Tommy Rettig are so beautiful. I love that connection between those characters.
I do too.
Yeah.
She also gets an opportunity to sing a number of numbers. Her singing is wonderful. She worked really hard on the guitar fingering. She wasn't actually playing the guitar, but when you watch, she is doing all of the correct chords. So that was really impressive as well. Now, there's a quick little funny story about Robert Mitchum used to like to tell that Mitchum had worked at Lockheed Aircraft with Monroe's then first husband, James Doherty. But Doherty would later dispute this, saying Bob never did meet Norma Jean when I was married to her. The closest he came was to eat some of her sandwiches because she would make him lunch, and Robert Mitchum never had any lunch. And so he would share his sandwiches with Robert Mitchum. So according to her first husband, they never met beforehand. Yeah. And then another funny thing, the 3 pairs of jeans that Marilyn Monroe wore in the movie were among a collection of her personal items that were sold for $42,550 at auction.
That's
at Christie's.
Some expensive jeans.
Yeah. So they were bought by Tommy Hilfiger.
Oh, I
Yeah,
love that.
that makes sense,
Yeah, it's
right?
where they should
He
be.
probably has a Gene museum somewhere. And young Tommy Rettig, you mentioned, who's so good in this
So
film.
good.
He would go on to do 4 seasons of Lassie. So this is also playing on TCM right now on their app. So check it out. It's a really wonderful performance by her.
Well, before we go much further, I think it's time for our pop quiz question of the week.
Yes, it
right?
is.
And the question is, of course, it's about Marilyn Monroe. You know, she's known for that very breathy, sexy voice.
Mhm.
But she developed that voice for a very specific reason. Do you know the reason? We'll find out.
We will find out what that reason is.
Yes, we will.
We'll be right back after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first, another stop on the Hollywood tour. Marilyn Monroe was obviously one of the most famous and recognizable people of her era. That wasn't always fun for her. Monroe was a naturally shy person who often needed a break from her ever-present spotlight. She would often wear a brunette wig, headscarf, and old clothes. Nobody would bother her. But even then, she occasionally felt conflicted about those rare moments of anonymity. One expert wrote, Marilyn loved her fans and enjoyed spending time with them. She once walked past fans while wearing her disguise only to feel sorry that they hadn't been able to meet her. The story goes she took off her disguise and went back to sign autographs so her fans could talk to her. But Monroe still had another trick up her sleeve. Everyone knows she was born Norma Jean Mortensen, but after becoming Marilyn Monroe and she needed to avoid even more attention, say when she was booking flights or hotel rooms, Monroe used a whimsical pseudonym. You ready for this? She came up with the name Zelda Zonk. Can you imagine if she had used that instead of Marilyn Monroe? And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we get into more of Marilyn Monroe's films that we want to share with you, it's time to give a shout out to our listener of the week, and that would be Nico Santiago, who actually lives in Los Angeles, but he's from Minnesota originally, which I think is very cool.
We love those Minnesotians.
Yes, so
is it Sodians?
Minnesotans?
Minnesotans. I love that.
Yeah. So thanks, Nico, for the likes and the support and all the comments. We so appreciate you.
Go Vikings.
Thank you, Nico.
That's for sure.
Yes. Well, the next movie that I'd love to talk about, it's also one of my favorites. And this movie is so wonderful. It's so beautiful. Niagara, 1953, directed by Henry Hathaway, and it was written by the great trio of Charles Brackett and Walter Reesh and Richard Breen, like iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it is this really wonderful, suspenseful thriller, and it's really set against the backdrop of the Niagara Falls, hence the name.
Yeah.
And it really is largely seen, the movie, it's largely seen from the eyes of our protagonist, who's Polly Cutlet. And she is a newlywed wife who's just checked into a motel at the top of the falls with her husband, Ray, played by Max Showalter. The trip begins to be this carefree honeymoon for them until she meets the Loomises, George and Rose Loomis, who are also staying at the hotel. And of course, they're played by Joseph Cotten and Marilyn Monroe.
What a combo.
Yeah, and the Loomises' relationship, it's really marked by jealousy and deception and all this emotional trauma. Well, you know, Polly sort of gets entangled with them in a big way, as we find out. You know, as she starts to observe the couple, she slowly uncovers this really diabolical plot that involves infidelity and murder. She really helps through her intelligence and her compassion and her curiosity. We really get to unravel this mystery of what's about to happen with the Loomises. While Marilyn Monroe's seductive Rose Loomis is a huge part of the publicity of the movie. I mean, she's on every poster and bigger than life. It's really Jean Peters who is the moral center of this movie, and she does a wonderful job, you know, really helping to tell the story and as the story escalates. As the plot unfolds, there's all these twists and turns that lead to this incredible murder, all under the backdrop of the thunderous, roaring waters of Niagara Falls, which is pretty amazing in and of itself. Just to see how they filmed this,
Yes.
it's spectacular. This movie, it really blends romance and drama and psychological tension, you know, all around the falls. All three stars deliver incredible performances. You know, Cotton, Peters, Monroe, top of their game. I mean, I think it's some of the three strongest performances of each of their careers. Now, some fun facts about this movie. It was originally supposed to star Ann Baxter as Polly Cutler.
Oh.
But once Ann Baxter was hired, they then hired Marilyn Monroe. And what happened was the writers went in and beefed up Marilyn Monroe's part because it's Marilyn Monroe, and why wouldn't you? Well, Ann Baxter didn't like this so much, as you can
Okay.
imagine. So she dropped out of the production, and she later said there was no way I was going to compete with Marilyn Monroe. So they replaced her with Jean Peters. Now, Jean Peters didn't really care that Marilyn's role had been beefed up because she and Marilyn actually came up together as starlets at 20th Century Fox, and they were really good friends. So Jean was like, this is great. I have a great role, and my friend has a
Yeah, I'm
great
gonna
role.
shoot with my friend at Niagara Falls.
Yeah, so who wouldn't want that? So now this movie was one of Marilyn's first major location shoots. So
Okay.
it was the summer of 1952, and they shot for 2 weeks around Niagara Falls, which getting permission to shoot there was a movie in and of itself. I mean, they had to deal with the Canadian side of the government and the United States side. They had to figure out how to lay electrical cables and not electrocute anybody because of all the
Wow, of
water. It was
course.
a pretty, rigorous, tense production, but they pulled it off beautifully, and they were able to show the falls in a way that I don't think any other film has really ever
I was
done.
just gonna ask, can you think of another one?
You know,
Yeah.
I know there's an old movie called Niagara Falls, and
Yes.
they show it to a degree, but it's mostly from distance.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, they go under the falls and through the falls, and just amazing. Once they were filming there, all the locals and all the tourists got wind, and they would all show up in droves just hoping to get a glimpse of Marilyn Monroe, which is really fun. Now, the director, Henry Hathaway, he had nothing but nice things to say about Marilyn. He called her a lovely girl, and even though she was pretty inexperienced, especially compared to her co-stars, Joseph Cotton and Jean Peters, I mean, she absolutely held her own, and Hathaway really recognized that she had this special screen magnetism you just couldn't make up. I mean, it was just naturally, innately in her, which was really great. In later years, he really spoke fondly about Marilyn Monroe, and he always said that he felt she had so much more to offer as an actress than she was ever allowed to play on the screen.
Mhm.
Now, kind of a fun story about this, speaking about the friendship between Jean Peters and Marilyn Monroe, when Jean Peters the next year got cast as the sexually provocative Candy in Pickup on South Street, one of my favorites, she wasn't really sure that she could pull off that sexy femme fatale thing. So what does she do? She calls her old pal Marilyn, and she goes, Marilyn, I've got this role. I don't know that I can do it. I'm just not that girl. Marilyn Monroe took her by the hand, walked her through it, really helped her formulate
Yes.
her character. And honestly, it is one of Jean Peters' best performances of her career. So hats off to Marilyn for helping out her buddy,
Yeah, yeah.
which is really, really nice. Now, Jean Peters, she knew, and she always acknowledged, Marilyn's help in this great role. But she also said one thing about playing this kind of a character. She said, on Marilyn Monroe, it looks good. On me, it just looks silly.
Oh.
But I would disagree with that
I
because
would
she
too.
is smoking in that movie.
Yes.
Now, perhaps the most important thing I think about Niagara is what happened after the movie. It became one of 20th Century Fox's biggest hits of 1953, and it was the first film to give Marilyn Monroe top billing. She's billed over Joseph Cotton and Jean Peters, which was a really big deal back in those days. But of course, within months, she's going to appear in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire, and she's going to take off to the stratosphere. But looking back, Niagara, it wasn't just a little thriller. This was absolutely the movie that proved that Marilyn Monroe was a bona fide movie star.
Wow. I
Yeah.
want to rewatch that tonight.
Yeah, and also kind of a cool little thing that it was one of the last movies to use the old 3-strip Technicolor. And they
Oh.
purposely did that because it really enhanced not only the falls, but Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
So, why
Yes.
not? Yeah.
Well, my last film is Bus Stop, 1956, directed by Joshua Logan, written by George Axelrod, based on the play by William Inge. Now, the play was nominated in 1956 for a Tony Award for Best Play, with Kim Stanley originating the Marilyn Monroe role on stage. Tried saying that 3 times
That's
fast.
hard.
The story is Bo Decker, a naive but stubborn cowboy played by Don Murray, falls in love with, he calls her Sherry, she says Cherie,
Cherie.
a saloon singer played by Marilyn
I'm
Monroe.
detecting a theme here
There is
with
a bit of a
Marilyn.
theme. There is a bit of a theme. And he tries to take her away against her will to get married and live on his ranch in Montana.
This movie would never fly
It would
today.
never fly. And the movie is very different from the play. In my opinion, not in a good way. The wonderful thing about the play is that it's confined to the diner.
Yeah.
Everybody is there. The characters are stuck because of the snowstorm. Well, this raises the stakes, creating greater conflict. It also is a wonderful opportunity for ensemble amongst all of the actors. I don't think this movie works nearly as well the way they've opened it up, save for the performance of Marilyn Monroe,
Yes.
who is absolutely terrific in a very nuanced and detailed characterization of Sherry. Others in the cast include Arthur O'Connell as Virgil, who's Beau's friend of reason when Beau continues to harass Sherry. Betty Field as Grace, who's the owner of the diner. Hope Lang as Alma, the waitress at the diner. That's her film debut. And Eileen Heckert, who plays her friend and confidant. Well, prior to filming Bus Stop, Monroe had taken a year off from films. During that time, she studied at the Actors Studio in New York and formed Marilyn Monroe Productions with producer Milton H. Green, with the hope of having more power over all of the elements of her films, including directors and actors, as well as the cinematography. Her production company produced 2 films. Bus Stop was the first, and she renegotiated a new 7-year contract with Fox. So she was really cooking, right?
Yeah.
She had the most creative control in her career with this picture, transforming her appearance and her accent to best suit the vision for the role. This film was also done in CinemaScope, with Monroe getting top billing. Reportedly, others that were considered for the role of Beau included Marlon Brando, Elvis Presley,
I had read that.
who I would have loved to have seen.
That would have been interesting.
Apparently, the Colonel said no. And Monroe wanted Rock Hudson, but he wasn't interested in the part. I would have loved to have seen him too.
Yeah.
I find Don Murray, I'm so sorry, he is so irritating in this film. But it got him an Academy Award nomination in his film debut.
He's the only one who got Oscar nominated, which it baffles my mind.
It's egregious that Monroe was not nominated.
Yes.
I mean, it truly is.
And some of the other, Betty Field, Arthur O'Connell, so many great performances.
But she really, I think this is maybe my favorite of her performances, because while she's still playing that showgirl being pursued by a man, she wants none of it. She is matter of fact. She knows what her desires are. She knows who she is. She doesn't need a man to help her.
Yes.
And she is, she's on her way to Hollywood and Vine, and she's not going to stop. Even her choice of the dialect that she uses in the film, it's very different from other portrayals of hers. Her vocal tone is different. She changed the color of her skin and her hair. She was very, very specific about how she wanted this character to look and sound. And I think her scenes opposite the female characters in this film, particularly Eileen Heckert, are just really terrific.
He's so good.
She has another opportunity to sing, and her performance of Black Magic is absolutely iconic.
So good.
Steve, you talked about this portrayal. We were talking about this episode, and you were saying this is really more of her being a character actress. And it really kind of makes you wonder, when you look at it through that lens, what she might have gone on to do had she been able to grow old, you know?
Cameron and I were just talking about, do you think Marilyn Monroe would have been the icon she is today had she not died so young?
Yes.
I mean, and what would her career have ended up like? Would it be Mamie Van Doren land, or would it have been like, Elizabeth Taylor land? I don't know.
Yeah. I suspect she was smart enough to make it Elizabeth Taylor land.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's not my favorite film, but her performance is really special and well worth the misogyny that this film adaptation really seems to highlight.
It is cringy with the misogyny. I mean, he all but takes her like Tarzan and throws her over his shoulder.
He lassoes her.
He does lasso her.
I mean, or at one point, not at the end, but he lassoes her at some point. Yeah. 2 little fun facts about this film. Don Murray would go on to marry Hope Lang.
That's right.
And also,
I knew their son.
You did?
I did, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very nice guy.
For you listeners out there who are looking for the extras in every film, Bess Flowers makes an appearance
Bess
as
is there.
Uncredited passenger on the bus, so look for her next time you see the film.
The game continues.
Yes, it does.
Like, where in the
Where's
world
Waldo?
is Bess Flowers?
Where's Bess Flowers? Yeah.
Well, my final film I want to talk about, again, it's not my favorite, but there's something about it that's so compelling. And of course, it's The 7-Year Itch.
Oh.
1955, directed by Billy Wilder, the great. It was written by George Axelrod, who also wrote yours, and also Billy Wilder. He helped write the screenplay too, but it was based on the Broadway play by Axelrod. And it was from 20th Century Fox, of course. And this movie did really well. I mean, Billy Wilder was nominated for a DGA award,
Oh, wow.
and he and Axelrod were nominated for a WGA award. Marilyn Monroe was nominated for a BAFTA award for Best Actress, and Tom Ewell actually won the Best Actor award for the Golden Globes. So, you know, pretty prestigious.
Yeah.
It's an interesting movie. It's a romantic comedy, and it follows a New Yorker named Richard Sherman, played by Tom Ewell. And he's this happily married guy who's a publisher in Manhattan. And one summer, his wife, played by Evelyn Keyes, and their son end up leaving town for the summer, but he can't go because of work. So he's sort of left in the city during a very sweltering heat wave, you know, left to his own devices, which maybe isn't a good thing, because he starts to experience what he thinks is the 7-year itch. And we all have heard that term, the 7-year itch. And that's when, you know, after 7 years in marriage, supposedly that one partner will get restless and he'll be tempted by other romantic partners. His 7-year itch really jumps into overdrive when this young, beautiful, blonde, sexy woman moves upstairs of his apartment. And throughout the entire movie, she's never given a name. They just call her the girl throughout the entire movie, which is so rude.
Oh, it's awful.
So the girl, of course, is played by Marilyn Monroe, and she's luminous. She's so great. As Richard becomes increasingly more infatuated with her, he begins to have these Walter Mitty-like fantasies about this illicit affair with her and this passionate romance with her. And he really starts to question his faithfulness to Evelyn Keyes. You know, will he stay faithful to her? You know, what's going to happen? A lot of the humor in this movie is contrasting his elaborate fantasies about this romantic relationship with Monroe and the reality of what their real interactions are like, which are pretty mild and pretty tame. And Marilyn, for her part, you know, she's very friendly, she's very polite to him, but she has no clue the turmoil that she's causing this poor man. Directed by Billy Wilder, it's really remembered for a very witty exploration of temptation and fantasy and marital anxiety. And it's also known for Marilyn Monroe's iconic performance. And the film's very famous scene is the one, and we all know it, where Marilyn steps across a subway grate, the train goes by, her white pleated skirt flies up over her head. I mean, one of the most famous scenes, I would say, in film history.
Yes.
And it really helped solidify Marilyn Monroe as a cultural icon. Now, this iconic scene of her in the dress blowing up was actually shot the night of September the 15th, 1954, with Marilyn on the corner of Lexington and 52nd in Manhattan. And Billy Wilder, being, you know, the showman that he is, he knew this was going to be a spectacle. So he invited the press to come. He encouraged people to show up. So as they're shooting this, she is surrounded by so many looky-loos and press members and things like that. So every time the skirt blows up, the audience starts cheering and whistling and shouting. And so they have to do it again and again and again and again, you know, because they've really created this frenzy of media around her. Well, ironically, most of the footage they used, they weren't able to use because the sound was no good because of all the cheering and the whistling and all of that from the bystanders. They ended up having to recreate this scene on a sound stage several months later in Hollywood, which is so funny. But one thing about this scene that really had some negative effects on Monroe was the fact that her husband, Joe DiMaggio, was there during the filming, and he did not like it one bit. He really felt like it was a spectacle, and he really felt that Billy Wilder was taking advantage of her and kind of exploiting her a little bit. Well, it caused a lot of tensions between him and Marilyn Monroe. And sadly, just a few months later, they ended up separating. So the subway grate sequence, it's one of the most famous scenes in film history, but on a personal level, it really ended up with deeply unhappy results for Marilyn Monroe and her marriage, which is too bad. Now, another interesting thing about this movie involves censorship. Because based on the play, the play is much more daring than the movie is. In the play, it is a full-blown affair. But because of the production code of the time, they couldn't really show an illicit affair. So it really was shifted to be more about fantasy and imagination rather than a full infidelity. And this made Billy Wilder furious. He hated it because he really wanted this to be a little edgier, to have a little more bite to it than it did, which is, and it made him actually go on to say he wished he'd never directed it, which is really a shame because, despite it maybe not being as edgy as the play, it is a charming, really funny movie, and I think he should be proud of it. Let's talk about the white dress. The pleated white dress, it's one of the most iconic costumes, I think, in film history. It was designed by costume designer William Trevilla, who, of course, we talked about when we covered Donna Drake in an earlier episode. He was her husband. Now, he would, for years, call it that silly little dress. He didn't get it at all, or so he says. But despite this modest description, it really did become this iconic costume piece. And he must have liked it a little bit because he held on to it until he died. And
her actual
he
costume.
held on to the original white pleated dress until he died. It was part of his estate.
Oh my gosh.
And when his estate went on the market, it was purchased for $200 by Debbie Reynolds, who, of course, we know at the time was trying to preserve all the costumes and the props from the classic cinema. So good on her. She bought this dress for $200. She held on to it for, I think, 20 years. And in 2011, she decided to auction it off. And for that little $200 silly little dress, she ended up getting $4.6 million, which goes to show what an iconic piece of film history this dress was, and this movie.
Yes.
Not too shabby, Debbie.
Yeah. I need to see that film again, too. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's not the best film, but it's really worth a watch.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday, Marilyn.
She has left behind such a rich legacy of movies and performances and just being an icon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really the definition of that word, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's remind listeners of this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And the pop quiz question, of course, she had the sexy, breathy voice. She developed it for a very specific reason. Do we know why?
Why?
When she was young, she had a really bad stutter. And there was a speech pathologist who worked with her and taught her that by using much more air in her voice, it would get rid of the stutter, and it worked. So she remembered that, and as she started her career, she started using it to kind of help her create a character, and that's where the sexy, breathy voice was born.
Wow.
And which became her trademark.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
So from stutter to trademark.
To trademark,
yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for spending this time with us. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. You can also follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign, and you can find us on Facebook and on Instagram.
And we love your emails. Please keep those coming. You can email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2026, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.
Welcome back, everyone. What are we talking about? Welcome back, everyone. Before we get into more of Marilyn Monroe, Lord God, help me. And another for you.